Only I came to my husband's memorial. Not my son, not my daughter, not a single grandchild, just me, the urn, and the Atlantic wind pushing the chapel door offbeat like even the weather wouldn't stay. The funeral director hovered eyes on the empty folding chairs. "Would you like to wait a few minutes?" Mrs. Whitfield, numb. Start. Alan hated delays pills by the clock news at 6. His boat key hung in the same hook for 40 years. The lilies looked gaudy. The pews looked new. Grief looked like a room reserved and never used. I slid a green return receipt into my coat pocket and wondered not where my children were, but what else they'd signed while I stood here alone. By sunset, they'd learn. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The pastor cleared his throat with the gentleness of someone stepping across a creaking floor. He read as if sound itself could bruise. Scripture moved through the room without landing syllables that should have felt old and anchoring, turning light and distant instead. The organist never touched the keys. He watched me with the soft alarm people reserve for widows and accidents. I gave him a small nod as if to say, "Spare yourself," and he lowered his gaze to the hymnal he would not open. A single strand of hair worked itself loose and tickled my cheek. I didn't move it. The air tasted faintly of salt and disinfectant, a clean attempt at erasing what cannot be erased. Someone had polished the brass handles until they gleamed like a promise no one kept. The program lay printed in neat serif lettering across 3 pages. Alan's name, 2 dates, an order of service designed for a crowd that never arrived. I folded one copy once, then again, until it could disappear inside my palm. I would find it months later in a coat pocket, thin as a pressed leaf. The funeral director approached me between readings, his voice pitched low with careful neutrality. "If anyone else should come, we can pause." He waited for a sign of softness. I gave him a sign of clarity instead. "We won't pause." He nodded and retreated, relieved to have been told what to do. When the pastor asked if someone would like to speak, the room let out a small surrender of silence. It would have been so easy to fill that space with the headlines of a decent life, the way Alan steered his skiff into fog, as if fog were only shyness, the mornings he set 2 mugs on the counter, even when one of us claimed we weren't thirsty. The winter he taught our grandson how to tie a cleat hitch without tightening it so much it scarred the rope. I let the silence stand in for all of it. Love is not measured by microphones. A gull trailed the high window like a brushstroke. The chapel door knocked once against its frame and settled. Outside the parking lot shone the hard black of new tar after rain. A woman in a navy coat crossed toward the rectory with a casserole. She looked toward the chapel out of habit, as if expecting to see people smoke and murmur under the awning, then reconsidered and kept going. It struck me that grief is often accompanied by food and small talk, and almost never by accuracy. When the pastor closed his book, we stood together and created the illusion of a congregation. He walked in front of me, the funeral director behind me, and the urn so light in my hands I nearly resented it. I thought of the heft Alan had once carried bait buckets, nets lumber a toolbox that could bruise your knees if you kicked it by mistake. Now he weighed less than a bag of flour. The absurdity made me breathe in until the waistband of my dress pressed back. We moved through the double doors and into the courtyard. The wind rose like a voice from a room you hadn't realized had a door. The Atlantic was a gray plate, and the horizon had narrowed into a seam. The pastor said something about dust and comfort and everlasting arms. The funeral director said nothing. He had the sense to let weather do the heavy lifting. I placed the urn on the low granite ledge by the chapel garden and rested my palm on its cool curve. The lilies had been arranged 2 symmetrically, 3 at a left slant, 3 to the right, a center stalk reaching like an obligation. Alan would have called the bouquet opinionated. He had always preferred the haphazard beauty of what the tide left behind, tangled eelgrass, a piece of driftwood with a nail rusted into it, a shell that looked broken until you turned it and saw the fragile architecture still intact. The funeral director offered me a pen to sign the guest book. The pen felt heavy for what it had to accomplish. I wrote my name on the first line, the ink laying itself down without blot. He turned the book, gently checking for other entries. It yawned blank at us, a ledger hungry for proof of attendance. He looked embarrassed on behalf of my family, which is a kindness I did not ask him to carry. He handed me a small envelope with the certificate the county would require for whatever came next. The paper was stiff, the seal raised under my fingers like a reminder you cannot misplace. I slid it into my bag beside the green return receipt and zipped the leather shut, the sound crisp as a new thought. There is a particular relief in knowing exactly where the documents are. A bell on the dock line at the bottom of the hill clanged and then calmed. When the pastor asked if I needed the urn carried to my car, I told him I could manage. He blessed me in words that felt more like a hope than a fact. The funeral director walked me to the door. His shoes had picked up a rind of salt on the toes that would dry white by afternoon. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, and let my name sit there like a hand offered and not insisted upon. I thanked him for the clean order of a service that did not ask me to perform. In the vestibule, I paused by a small table set with tissues and a bowl of mints nobody took. A child had drawn a picture at some earlier event and left it wedged beneath the glass. A house with a square door and 4 windows, a sun the size of a plate, smiling in the upper corner, a tree with green spirals instead of leaves. I wondered if Jenna had ever drawn like that for me, if I had magneted such a sun to our fridge and stood with my coffee admiring it as if admiration were a spell. Memory is clever. It pretends at chronology when what it's really doing is choosing comfort. Outside, the wind rearranged the smell of the day. I carried Alan across the quiet lot and set him gently on the back seat, buckling the urn as if I could keep anything safe with nylon and a click. The act felt both ridiculous and perfectly sane. I checked the buckle anyway and closed the door softly as if sound could bruise. Habit is a religion of its own. I didn't drive off. I sat with both hands on the wheel and let the engine tick into evenness. Down the hill, the dock bell gave a lazy courtesy ring. A man in a green watch cap loaded traps from a truck that should have retired 5 winters ago. The familiar choreography of a small place repeated itself without ceremony. For a few minutes, I watched the town continue a comfort I allowed myself without apology. "Would you like flowers to be delivered to your home?" the funeral director asked from my open window. "Or would you prefer we donate them to the hospital?" I pictured the lilies invading my kitchen with their eager scent sitting in a glass vase like guests overstaying, breaking the clean shape of quiet I needed. "Hospital," I said. "The oncology wing if they'll have them." He nodded. Alan would approve. It was almost a question. He would, I agreed. Alan had hated waste dressed as courtesy. I drove the long way home the road that runs so close to the water you can count the shags on the pilings. The trees had let go of most of their leaves the way goodbyes should be let go of, not all at once, but steadily, so that by the time the branches bare, you cannot accuse it of dramatics. The harbor was stitched with ropes and floats, the useful language of the place. The radio stayed off. The silence in the car belonged to someone competent. At the last curve before the turn to my street, a red light held me, and I watched a young couple hustle across the crosswalk, the woman laughing with her head thrown back, paper cups in their hands steaming. It did not stab. It simply happened alongside me. Losing someone does not make other people's coffee any less warm. The house received me like a coat you put on without thinking. I set the urn on the sideboard where we used to drop the mail, the varnish catching the dull light. Alan's boat key hung from its hook by the back door, the brass worn to softness where his thumb had found it 1,000 times. I reached out and touched it, the coolness a relief against the heat of my palm. That hook had been placed there the week we moved in, a nail hammered into plaster while the paint was still tacky. We never needed another place to put the key. Sometimes the best systems are simply the ones you never explain. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. The kitchen clock ticked in that thin, reassuring way, as if keeping time were just a matter of good manners. On the counter lay a stack of mail I had not touched for 3 days. Catalogs, a dental reminder, an envelope with the bank's embossed name that made my chest rise in a different kind of breath. I placed it beneath my hand without opening it the way a person might press a wound lightly before examining it. Not yet, I told myself. Ceremony requires pacing. Steam feathered the window panes. I took down a mug that belonged to no set and spooned tea leaves without measuring. The smell unwound into the room honest and unadorned. I poured sat and let my bones register the architecture that would have to hold me now. The coat on the chair back still remembered Alan's shoulders. I folded it over the rung so it would remember anything else instead. On the kitchen table, a shadow moved where light met the edge of a vase of rosemary I had cut 2 days ago and forgotten to throw out. The sprigs had stiffened into their own insistence. I snapped one between my fingers and rubbed the oil into my skin. Clean, piney, medicinal. The smell traveled me through winters and soups, and the year the flu crested and did not take us. My throat worked. I took a sip of tea and set the cup down on a cork ring Alan had sanded smooth from a bottle's cork and a scrap of wood. He had liked to save the smallest things from the trash. I stood and walked to the file cabinet in the hallway, its drawer labels penned in Alan's square hand. House, taxes, family. The metal slide sang a single tired note as I opened the top drawer and rested my fingertips on the tabs. I did not pull anything out. Not yet. The papers would be patient. They had nowhere else to be. I closed the drawer, and the house swallowed the sound. Back in the kitchen, I folded the program into a flat, obedient shape and tucked it into the cookbook spine, where the gingerbread page always falls open. If anyone ever asked, I could say I tucked it where sweetness lives. More truthfully, I tucked it where I knew I would find it without performing grief for an audience that wasn't here. I picked up my phone without intending to. The screen woke, and the black glass offered my face back to me, a stranger I recognized completely. I didn't open anything. Not messages, not photographs, not the places I could go to feel less alone, and did not. I placed the phone face down and breathed between the whistles of the kettle settling and the heater knocking once in the vent, like a reminder of a different season about to shoulder in. Sometimes justice begins like this, I thought. Not with a gavel, not with a headline. With a woman in a quiet kitchen letting a cup of tea cool to the temperature of her resolve. I glanced toward the hook by the door, the brass glint catching. I took the green return receipt from my coat pocket and laid it in the dish beside the key. A small altar to diligence. By sunset, there would be other papers. By sunset, something that had leaned too far would be set right enough to stand. I slept for an hour in the chair and woke to the house holding its breath. Afternoon light washed the cabinets the color of sand. I stood, stretched the ache out of my ribs, and felt the little pull of fabric where a loose thread had found its way into the hem of my sleeve. Every small imperfection seemed newly legible, as if grief sharpened the eyes before it softened anything else. Alan's weather jacket hung on its peg by the back door, a faded blue that had surrendered to salt and season. When I lifted the collar, it still carried that clean iodine scent of open water and a stubborn note of engine grease he never managed to scrub from his cuffs. I laid the jacket back with the care reserved for tools you intend to use again, even if you no longer can. On the kitchen table, the mail waited with unearned patience. The bank envelope sat on top, the embossed name catching light in a way I did not appreciate. Under it, a realtor's flyer for seaside condos people, from a way pretend are quaint, until winter arrives and proves that quaint is work. I moved the envelope but did not open it. Some choices improve with a little air. I told myself I would make soup, or at least chop an onion. Instead, I touched the phone. The screen woke to the familiar grid, and my thumb obeyed a muscle memory I did not grant permission. I opened Jenna's page. The most recent video swelled to life with a jolt of music, women framed in a glow that hides the rude invention of overhead light. She raised a glass with citrus slices floating like life preservers and pressed her cheek against a friend's temple. The caption pulsed with warmth and glittering encouragements from strangers. Bottomless brunch girls who show up for girls never apologize for choosing joy. I had no quarrel with joy. I did have a quarrel with arithmetic. I watched without sound, and even so I could hear the cork pops and the practice squeal that people perform when they want a room to know they are untroubled. Jenna's bracelet flashed each time she touched her hair. The light caught on a ring I had bought for her during a season when it seemed wise to decorate a fissure rather than mend it. I scrolled once more out of some dim hope the algorithm would confess to a mistake and deliver a photo of a church door instead. The feed offered a plate of eggs and a message about nourishing your inner child. I closed the app and placed the phone face down with the care of a person returning a fragile object to a shelf. Marcus had posted a slideshow the night before, vineyard rows like carefully parted hair, a shot of shoes on a tasting room floor, a short clip of a man in a polo discussing tannins as if they were policy. In the final frame, Marcus snapped a photo of himself and a colleague laughing toward the lens, their teeth clean and the world apparently sturdy beneath them. He had used the phrase deal flow like a man who had recently learned it. His wife had put a white heart in the comments. The heart bloomed on my screen like a small error. The kettle on the stove sighed once and settled. I reached for the mug with the hairline crack that runs from lip to base like a river on a map. It is the one that never breaks. The rim warms more quickly than the others, as if its flaw made it eager. I poured tea and watched the clouded amber draw down into calm. On the sill, the rosemary I had almost thrown away lifted itself in a half-hearted tribute to light. I tasted the tea and set the cup on a folded linen square Alan had used as a sailcloth napkin the summer we ate on the back steps for a week because the table was buried in boat parts. For a moment, I let that week return, how the screws kept finding their escape routes through the cracks in the boards, and how we laughed each time we retrieved one from the gravel with a magnet taped to a yardstick. The memory left the room the way good guests leave with no need to be applauded. An email badge flared on the phone. I should have ignored it. I did not. The subject line used my name with cheerful efficiency. Key pickup for Coastal Cottage. Inside, a polite paragraph thanked me for streamlining the onboarding process with Harbor Bright Rentals. A link invited me to confirm the digital lock code and grant guest access for the next 30 days. My finger went still above the glass. The body of the email displayed a neat graphic of a familiar floor plan and a list of amenities that seemed to have found their way into a version of my life I had not ordered. There was a signature block with a stylized lighthouse and a phone number I recognized. Harbor Bright managed short-term rentals for people too busy living somewhere else to change sheets. We had discussed the company once in the abstract when the cottage roof needed repair, and Marcus brought up monetizing the asset with the enthusiasm of a man who believes the verb redeems the noun. I clicked the audit trail because old habits die after last. A window unfolded with timestamps and addresses. The e-signature field held my own carefully spelled name, the letters precise in a way that would have pleased a teacher. Beside it lived a date and time down to the minute parked exactly in the center of this morning when the pastor's mouth formed comfort, and I chose silence instead. The browser string indicated a mobile device. The originating IP belonged to my internet provider, but the geolocation pin hovered 1.5 miles from this kitchen, across the little bridge near the bait shop, on a street where my son keeps a house he cannot afford without help. The room did a quiet trick where all the white surfaces became cooler by a note or two. I took another sip of tea and confirmed that taste had not changed. It was still strong and a little bitter, which was exactly what was required. I clicked download and watched the file settle in the corner of my screen like a new weight. I forwarded the email to myself and to a folder I had created years ago with the name I give folders I intend to win with. Then I went to the window and opened it 2 inches. The hinge gave the complaint of metal that had done its duty through too many seasons and would do it again. The phone vibrated against the table with the insect insistence of a call, a number I did not recognize, though the area code belonged to here. I answered because sometimes the right thing to do sounds exactly like this. Mrs. Whitfield. This is Liza from Harbor Bright. First, please let me say we are so sorry for your loss. Your son mentioned your family is navigating a lot. We want to make this as seamless as possible. I just wanted to confirm the smart lock code for the cottage and check whether you would like us to enable early check-in for your first guests. I watched my hand move toward a pen without my permission. The pen obeyed me anyway. I uncapped it and wrote the date on the margin of a grocery list. What name did my son give you, I asked, and kept my voice as clean as my counters. Papers behave better for people who sound like they have wiped something down recently. Marcus Whitfield, she said. He signed on your behalf this morning using your saved profile. We have everything in order. We just need your preferred code. My profile, I said. She hurried to be helpful. Yes, he said you had used our system before. Sometimes the platform remembers things we wish it would forget. I let that line hang. She filled it with sincerity. We can change anything you want after Go Live. The market's fantastic right now. On the windowsill, the Rosemary agreed with nothing. I thanked her for reaching out and told her we would not be moving forward today. I told her we would not be moving forward tomorrow either. I told her it was in everyone's best interest that no one step foot in that cottage unless they possessed a key on a ring I could hold in my hand. She tried to offer assurances about insurance and cleaning protocols and premium guest screening, and I let her talk until her script ran out. Then I asked for the document numbers for everything she had sent and asked her to email me the server logs that would show when each field had been completed and from which device. People apologize when you ask for logs. Liza apologized. Of course, I'll get those to you right away. When the line went quiet, I stared at the phone and thought about the word seamless. Seamlessness is a quality I prefer in stockings and meringues. It has no place in a decision that moves strangers into rooms where my husband's raincoat still drips in memory. I placed the phone back on the table, picked up my mug, and found the crack with my thumb. Tea lifted to the lip without spilling. The trick with a crack is learning how to drink so you do not wear what you meant to swallow. I walked into the living room and opened the old trunk we keep beneath the front window. Inside lay things that were useful and things that were not, but refused that designation. Alan's college scarf, the lantern we take out when storms pretend to be romantic and then cut the power to the whole street. The thick file where we kept appliance manuals because hope is orderly. Under the manual for the oven, I still resent sat the binder I wanted. Warranties and deeds, and a paper labeled with the cottage's parcel number in Alan's block printing. I removed the binder and set it on the coffee table. The spine protested. I opened to the section with the deed and traced the legal description that transformed shoreline and shingles into a paragraph of coordinate points and old names. At the back of the binder, the tabs for insurance and utilities gave way to a sleeve with old letters. Not important in any outward sense. Just notes we had written each other on grocery lists and appointment cards. The margins courts keep empty for phone numbers and sudden calculations. I slid a card free and found Alan's shorthand for stew ingredients. The carrots underlined twice because I always forgot carrots when the world felt too sharp. I put the card back. I would buy carrots tomorrow for the work of normal hands. When I returned to the kitchen, the air had gone cooler. I closed the window and turned the lock. The little tongue of brass slid home with a sound that answered a question inside me. I took the bank envelope and held it up to the light. The seal looked unbroken. I set it on the table and placed the cracked mug atop it, not to hide it but to weigh it down. Outside, the afternoon had begun its slope toward evening, the color going from forgiving to exact. I stood at the sink with my hands on the edge and let the old porcelain take my grip without complaint. Upstairs in the spare room, a plastic bin waited with photo albums that had not been opened in years. I imagined the photographs inside their smiles still doing their work even in the dark. I would look at them soon. I would not ask those faces to tell me what to do. Photographs are excellent at remembering and terrible at advising. The advice I needed sat in my inbox, and the binder on the coffee table, and the small bell that lived down the hill, ringing only when the wind told it to. The phone chimed. Liza had sent the logs. I printed them and watched the first sheet slide out with its neat block of numbers and addresses. The machine clicked once as it warmed to its task. I pressed the warm paper to the counter with my palm and breathed through my nose. Outside, a gull shouted something rude and honest. I smiled without meaning to. Then I gathered the papers into a stack that belonged together and placed a paper clip at the top left corner because neatness is the first indignity I choose for war. Morning light thinned across the hallway like silk being pulled through a ring. I stood before the file cabinet again and did not hesitate this time. The top drawer slid open with a metal sigh that felt older than it was. Alan's labels steadied me. House, taxes, family. I rested my fingertips on family, as if touching a name on a memorial wall, then lifted the folder free and carried it to the kitchen table, where the wood had learned to bear news both good and bad. I laid out a clean dish towel first. Paper deserves a decent stage. The folder unlatched with that little complaint older folders make when they know their contents are about to be argued with. Inside the stack kept the order we had promised it would. Original will at the front. Copies of healthcare directives. A durable power of attorney from 2 summers ago when Alan went in for a procedure we pretended was minor enough to joke about. Behind it, a beneficiary map Alan and I had drawn on yellow paper one wet March afternoon, our handwriting lapping at each other in the margins. The will's text sat in its serious serif like a person who keeps good posture even in line at the post office. We had written it when the children were still speaking to us, as if speaking were work done in both directions. The will divided what could be divided and asked for common sense about what could not. Names looked heavier on paper than they felt in the mouth. Jenna Whitfield, Marcus Whitfield. I let the letters rest in the room, then turned to the power of attorney and ran my finger beneath the clause that always calms and alarms in one breath. This authority ends upon the principal's death. The notary's seal rose under my thumb like a thumbprint turned to brass. The date was neat, the signature the firm everyday hand I had loved since he wrote our first grocery list and left it beneath a magnet shaped like an orange. I set the power of attorney aside. That piece could not be bent to anyone's convenience now. The yellow paper made a small sound as I drew it forward. Alan had titled it with embarrassing precision, Transfer on Death. Underneath, we had listed the accounts that would skip probate if we gave them directions, the checking that paid for heat and unexpected repairs, the investment account that grew slow and modest, the odd little credit union account we only kept because they used to offer free toasters. Next to each, we had written a plan. Equal shares to the children we wrote because once upon a time, the arithmetic felt sacred. I traced those lines with the tip of a pen and did not cross anything out. Crossing lines has its place. This moment asked for a record, not a reaction. Behind the yellow map, I found the envelope where I had tucked letters from banks and the brokerage that likes to explain what a beneficiary is as if you've never had one. I fanned the pages across the towel and felt the house go very quiet, the way rooms listen when lists are read. The checking named both children. The investment account named them again. The credit union account named no one, which felt like an accident wearing good clothes. I pulled that form aside and wrote a note to myself without apology at my own bossiness. Fix this first. At the bottom of the folder, an older envelope sagged with grocery store rubber bands that had gone satin with time. Inside lived the small artifacts of a life that respects countersignatures. Return receipts the color of tame grass, postal slips with lines for certified mail numbers, and a warning printed along the bottom that made me smile because it had once meant someone else was taking care with our messages. I selected 2 receipts and set them next to the will, then placed my palm over all of it. The paper warmed under my hand like a dog leaning into a knee, as if both parties had agreed to a brief contract of comfort. I went to the drawer that collects practical things when we can't find a better name for them. Postage, paper clips, the heavier envelopes that make clerks look up when they feel the weight of what is going out into the world. The stapler gave a small, willing cough when I pressed it over the corner of the beneficiary list and the most recent statements. I wrote today's date on a sticky note and fixed it to the top page. The simple act of naming a day has always made me braver. On the counter, my laptop waited a little too cheerful for the role it was about to play. I woke the screen and opened a new document. Title Estate Current State. Beneath it, I began a ledger of facts, as if I were writing instructions for a woman who would need them later and could not afford doubt. Will executed 6 years prior. Durable power of attorney ended upon death. No authority remains. Beneficiary designations exist on XYZ accounts naming Jenna and Marcus. Credit union account has none. Harbor Bright onboarding email received time-stamped 10:17 a.m. E-signature shows my name. IP resolves to street where Marcus resides. Phone call with Harbor Bright employee Liza at 2:03 p.m. Document numbers requested. Server logs received. I attached a scan of the first page of the logs, inserted a screenshot of the audit trail, and made a new folder on the desktop, labeled in a way that would not make me blush if anyone else ever saw it. Evidence goes here. The scanner down the hall woke and began its comforting hum, pulling pages through with that confident little tug devices perform when they feel useful. I fed in the will and the power of attorney and the beneficiary statements, then watched the digital pages collect into a tidy stack you could scroll with a thumb. The room smelled faintly of warmed plastic and rosemary and the mild starch I use on napkins when I still believe in company. It was not unpleasant. It felt like a workroom wearing a good perfume. When I finished scanning, I lifted the green receipts and turned them over. A blank field waited for names and addresses for the particular choreography of a letter that cannot be argued away as rumor. I did not fill them in. Not yet. Space has a function. It reminds you that an action is yours to take or not. I slid the receipts into the inside pocket of the folder and returned to the laptop to draft an outline for the certified letters that would accompany them. I use the formal tense even in my own notes because someday those words might require standing on their own. Notice of revocation of any assumed authority. Notice of unauthorized use of personal profile. Notice of intent to restrict access to property pending review. Beneath each, I left room for the case number the bank would assign when I asked nicely and then less nicely. At the sink, I ran water over a lemon and cut 3 thin slices the knife, finding its path as if it had been trained to this fruit. I added one to my glass of tap water and set the other 2 on a saucer for no reason other than that small, cold circles tasting sharp have a way of convincing a person she is not merely managing documents, but participating in a ritual she invented and plans to keep. My spine remembered its length. My shoulders fell from my ears. I took a drink and returned to the table. Under taxes. Alan had filed exactly what you would expect returns, 1099 slips of paper with numbers that told us what we already knew about our good behavior. I pulled last year's return and placed it beside the list of accounts. The familiar lines settled under my eyes like well-behaved students. Our accountant had once told me I am the sort of client who arrives to a meeting carrying not only the facts, but the order in which they would like to be believed. It was not an insult. House yielded a map of the cottage parcel, a plat from the county receipts from the roofer, who talks too long but never pads a bill, and the deed recorded 2 decades ago with a clerk who drew a tiny star next to her own signature because she claimed it made her day to be remembered for something other than typing. I put the deed under the scanner as well and listened for the click that means a copy has joined the rest. By the time an hour had passed, the digital folder had grown into the kind of document list that makes other people look twice. I saved everything to a flash drive and taped a small piece of paper to it with a date and the words "send to council" when secured. I did not write any names. Names come after doors have been checked. I set the flash drive in a ceramic dish near the back door, the same dish that holds house keys, and the screwdriver we keep handy for the cabinet that loosens its hinge any time the weather moves. The boat key hung above like a witness. I reached up and steadied it with one finger until it stopped swaying. The room felt aligned. On a legal pad, I began a timeline in neat columns. Left column times, center events, right notes, 10:17 Harbor Bright e-signature, 10:30 to 11 memorial service present in chapel, corroborated by director and pastor, 2:03 call with Harbor Bright, logs requested, 2:20 logs received. I left space for the bank appointment that did not exist yet, and for the letter that would go out with tracking numbers I could read from a receipt and recite if awakened from sleep. The act of arranging truth on paper felt less like war and more like gardening. You clear, you place, you water. The tending is its own victory. The day had thinned toward evening without asking my permission. Light climbed the far wall and then let go. I switched on the small lamp on the buffet and watched the shade do its soft work. The urn held its place without comment. I went to the window and looked toward the thin line where the harbor meets the road. Headlights rose and sank over the hill. Somewhere down there, the bell would give one more dull ring before the night laid a hand over the water and asked it to rest. I returned to the table, gathered the paperwork back into order, and fastened the folder shut. I slid it into the file cabinet and closed the drawer with a finality that did not feel theatrical. In the quiet that followed, I heard the faint tick from the clock in the hall, and the less faint sound of my own breath smoothing itself into the rhythm the body knows when it decides that the hardest part of a day has been done correctly. I took the lemon slices from the saucer and put them into a jar for morning, the way you prepare for a future by admitting there will be one. The phone lay upside down on the table. I did not turn it over. Tomorrow would have its calls, and I would have my list. Tonight, I would let the house return to itself without having to narrate that return to anyone who hadn't been there when the nail went into the plaster and the key found its hook. Aisha Patel's office sat above a bakery that perfumed the stairwell with butter and heat. The hallway carpet had been pressed thin by the kind of shoes that step quietly on purpose. Her door bore a small plaque that preferred discretion to marketing. Inside, the air held the steadiness of lemon oil and paper. Shelves had been made to fit the room, not the other way around. Aisha rose when I entered, hand-cool eyes alert, in the way of someone trained to measure a story twice before cutting Mrs. Whitfield, she said, and waited until I chose a chair. I chose the one with its back to the window, so my face would not be a silhouette for any truth I had not yet chosen to tell. She poured water into a glass that had the decency to be heavy. I set my folder on the table and placed the flash drive atop it like a period. She did not ask how I was. Good attorneys do not begin by inviting applause for suffering. You said on the phone there was activity on a property profile that did not originate with you. I slid the printed logs across. There was an attempt to place the cottage into a short-term rental rotation. This time stamp sits inside the hour I spent at the chapel. The signature field bears my name. The connection pinpoints near a street where my son keeps his house. Aisha read with the quiet that comes from practice. She touched the corner of the page, not the words. "We can obtain more," she said. "The platform will have device fingerprints and a sequence of actions. People who borrow names rarely understand how much their machines confess." I placed the beneficiary statements in a second stack. Our will is older, but sound. There are transfer-on-death instructions on multiple accounts, both children named. We wrote those on a day when equal felt like holy rather than convenient. I kept my voice even. The room rewarded balance. Aisha nodded and uncapped a pen with a soft click. It was a Parker black lacquer that caught light in a single disciplined line. "Here is where I will be precise," she said. "The power of attorney you executed for your husband ended the moment he died. Any authority your son imagines he holds on your behalf is not merely expired, it is a fiction. Beneficiary designations, however, remain very real until you change them. They operate outside your will. They do not care how anyone behaves at a memorial." "I would like them to care a little," I said, and the dryness in my voice surprised me. She let the line stand without reaching to pat it. "We will revise each designation. If you wish to pause on who receives, we can name the estate temporarily. That brings those funds into the orbit of your will, which we can amend today. But there is more efficient architecture." She drew a rectangle on a legal pad and wrote a name inside it. Whitfield Coastal Trust. The letters sat clean and forward on the page, as if the entity already owned itself. "An irrevocable trust will protect the cottage, the accounts we choose, and any future additions. If your aim is to prevent interference, this is the boat that does not take on water, even when someone leans hard over the gunwale to peer in." "And who holds the tiller?" I asked. "You," she said. "As grantor, you can reserve a life interest in the cottage as residence. We will appoint a trustee. That can be you during your lifetime, or a corporate trustee if you prefer the kind of neutrality that never comes to Thanksgiving. We will add a spendthrift clause to protect the beneficiary from creditors and from their own worst Tuesday." I thought of Noah with a screwdriver in his fist and sunlight for giving his hair. "The primary beneficiary will be my grandson. He shows up without being told to make it look like showing up. I want protections until he is 30. Exceptions for education, medical and housing that is not ornamental. No early withdrawals to impress anyone. Aisha's pen moved without sound. Disbursement standards will be HEMS, she said, and wrote the letters in the margin. Health education maintenance support. We will also consider a no-contest clause in your will, should either child attempt to challenge the trust's integration with the estate. They like words like challenge, I said. They use them as if they were a sport. She smiled, and it reached the eyes but did not loosen their work. We can make the cost of sport clear. She turned to her computer and began to build the bones. My name appeared in clean type, with its middle initials standing upright like someone ready to testify. She asked for dates and numbers and locations where I could be found in a hurry. I supplied each without embroidery. When she reached the section for trustee, she looked up. You may choose yourself with a successor named for when you are finished with the administrative part of love. Or you may appoint a bank. Households that include hurt sometimes respect steel more than flesh. Start with me, I said. Name the bank as successor. I want to place Noah between my hand and theirs until he knows how to keep his own hand firm. She nodded. We will add an independent trust protector with power to resolve administrative disputes or to remove a trustee for cause. That role has no access to assets. It exists so that you are never stuck waiting for a court when someone remembers how to be persuasive. Her phone chimed once, some system informing her that a draft had saved itself. She ignored it. Tell me about the cottage title. Joint with right of survivorship or sole? Sole, I said. Alan liked clear lines. We recorded the deed that way decades ago. He said a home is less likely to be argued over when the paper speaks in a singular voice. Wise, she said. We will deed the cottage into the trust by warranty deed. The transfer will be recorded with the county. You will remain in it as a matter of right for as long as you choose. After it moves as the trust commands. It felt like moving a boat to a mooring with better shelter. The boat remains the boat. The line is what changes. Aisha opened a drawer and withdrew a stack of cards. The top one bore her name pressed into white stock so thick you wanted to press back. She wrote her direct line beneath the printed one. We will also issue notice letters today. One to your son, one to your daughter, one to Harbor Bright. One to your bank and brokerage so all departments are awake at the same time. Tone will be factual, not theatrical. We will request preservation of logs and confirm that no third party has authority to act on your behalf. Her phrasing steadied me the way Alan's handwriting always had. The shape of caution can feel like love when done cleanly. And the rental platform I asked. I want their records kept like winter vegetables. We will send a spoliation letter demanding preservation of all metadata, including IP addresses, device IDs, session durations, and any account linkages to profiles used in the attempted listing. We will request they disable any pending listing and note your objection in their system so the next customer service script cannot bulldoze it. She printed the first draft of the trust's declaration pages. The printer hummed behind her shoulder and fed out paper with authority. I read line by line, stopping where the legalese diluted into clarity. Grantor, trustee, beneficiary, discretion. The spendthrift clause sang its sterile song about creditors and claims and the way other people's appetites stop at a fence they can see. Aisha slid a small ceramic dish toward me. Inside were 2 paper clips and a square of chocolate wrapped in gold. Eat the chocolate, she said without looking up. It makes the next part go quickly. I laughed once. The sound startled the air and then folded itself away like linen. She brought out the signature pages and turned them so they faced me. The Parker pen waited between us. I lifted it and tested the weight in my hand. It remembered how to write in a straight line. Before I signed, Aisha placed a notary stamp on the desk ink pad ready. We can notarize here, she said. Then we will walk 2 blocks to the bank and update beneficiary designations while momentum is on our side. I signed my name where the pages asked me to be clear. The pen did its work without blot. Aisha stamped and dated. The impression rose under my fingertip like a promise you could check later if you doubted yourself. She printed the no contest clause for my will and slid it forward with the gravity it deserved. This provision does not guarantee peace, she said. It does guarantee consequence. If either child files a contest without probable cause, they forfeit any bequest you might have otherwise left as a courtesy. I have less interest in courtesy than I did on Monday, I said. It came out evenly. She initialed the margin beside the clause, and I followed with my own. We prepared letters together. She dictated. I reviewed. Each began with facts. Each ended with a request phrased as an expectation. We added certified mail numbers as placeholders and left space for the return receipts to cross over with their careful signatures. She addressed the platform letter to a legal department rather than to a cheerful inbox. People in legal departments know what the word hold means, she said. They also tend to answer their phones when pressed by someone who keeps a ledger. Before we left, Aisha gathered copies into a folder with her firm's name on it. She slid one business card into the pocket facing the documents, as if to keep them company. "I'm going to ask a delicate question," she said at the door. "Do you want to inform your grandson today, or after filings are complete?" "After," I said. I do not want to hand a young man a promise still wet with ink. We stepped into the stairwell where the smell of bread had thickened into an invitation to stay. Aisha locked her office and pocketed the key. On the sidewalk, the wind carried the harbor in it. We walked side by side toward the bank, not quickly. She kept her portfolio hugged to her side like something alive and worthwhile. I matched her pace and felt the ground behave properly under my shoes. Inside the bank, the receptionist stood up before we reached her desk. "Ms. Patel," she said, "Mr. Barnes can see you now." Names opened doors here, but it was the documents that would keep them from closing on the wrong hands. We were shown to an office with a walnut desk and a window that pretended to be a painting of the harbor. Mr. Barnes wore a tie that had made an effort. He shook my hand the way men are taught to shake the hands of women who have decided things. Aisha conducted the conversation efficient without hurry. "We are updating beneficiary designations on the following accounts. We will be adding Whitfield Coastal Trust as beneficiary. We would appreciate confirmation that any previous pay-on-death instructions are revoked as of today." Mr. Barnes turned his monitor so that we could see the forms. He typed with 2 fingers and a care that suggested he had been trained by someone who once yelled about decimals. He printed and handed me a pen with the bank's name laughing up its side. I set it down gently and used the Parker instead. The difference mattered only to me, which was enough. We signed where required. He stamped where authorized. He read back the changes in a firm voice that did not ask for my approval as a favor, but as a clause. "Designated beneficiary, Whitfield Coastal Trust," he said, and each time he finished a line, a small part of the room corrected its posture. When we were done, Aisha asked for written confirmation for a copy of the bank's internal note for time, stamps for a receipt that listed the documents placed in my file today. Mr. Barnes did not bristle. He printed, he assembled. He placed each sheet into a folder he probably used when people wanted to feel that their day had accomplished something definitive. He slid the folder to me and waited while I counted pages in silence. We left the bank as the light decided to change. Outside the bakery, a woman balanced a box tied with twine as if she were holding a small, benevolent future. A bus sighed to a stop and opened its doors. The harbor bell gave one thoughtful strike. Aisha stood with me for a moment on the curb. "You have done the part most people avoid," she said. "You have begun." "I prefer to finish," I said. "You will." She handed me an extra business card. "If anyone calls with words like urgent or family, tell them your attorney will return their call. Then let me." She touched the Parker with one finger. "Keep that in your pocket today. People make different choices when a pen like that is on the table." We parted at the corner. I walked home with the folder against my side, the trust's name warming under my coat. The house met me with its familiar temperature. I set the folder on the sideboard beside the urn, the boat key the small dish where plans wait between their beginnings and their endings. I placed Aisha's card in the dish, too white and calm beside brass and paper. Then I stood with my hand over the folder and felt for a long breath the exact weight of something that would not be moved by accident. Jenna did not knock. The door swung in on its familiar complaint, and her perfume reached the room first, citrus sharpened to a point. She stood in the kitchen like a woman in a show-home sunglasses on her head, though the day was clouded. Her tote bag took the chair across from me as if it had been invited. She did not ask if I was busy. She looked around as if the room owed her an apology for being itself. "I've been calling," she said, and let the word calling wear more effort than it had earned. "I was at the bank," I said. I folded the dish towel that lived on the oven handle and set it square on the counter. The linen still held the memory of last night's lemon water, a clean scent that refused to argue. She laughed once, a sound made for rooms that clap. "People are messaging me. Is it true you're changing everything? Marcus says you're listening to other people." "I am listening to documents," I said. "They speak more clearly than anyone." Her eyes jumped to the folder on the sideboard and then back to my face. "This is because I didn't come to the service. We already talked about that." "We did not talk," I said. "You sent me a video of a brunch." She slid the sunglasses down over her eyes and pushed them back up again. The gesture bought her nothing. "I'm here now." The cabinet hinge behind her gave a small click as the wood settled. She turned toward the sound with a frown. The room had developed a habit of answering for me. I did not mind. "People are saying you're cutting us out," she said. "You know how this town is. It magnifies gossip. You should have come to me first." "I did," I said. "For years." Her mouth tightened. "I don't appreciate being punished because I have boundaries. I have a job. I have a life. I can't cancel things every time there is a family emergency." She lifted her chin. "I have anxiety when schedules change. You know that." "Anxiety does not bar a door," I said softly. "It asks for a chair." She waved a hand at the room. "You're being poetic. This is legal. Marcus told me about some trust. He said you signed something permanent." The last word tried to be a threat and landed as information. I refolded the towel and felt the weave settle under my fingers. I did sign. Permanence is sometimes the kindest gift you can give to a mess. "Wow," she said. "That's generous." We stood inside the practiced silence of two people who know each other too well to pretend they are strangers. She walked to the sink and filled a glass without asking. The water ran a steady ribbon and then stopped cleanly. She stood with her back to me and inspected her reflection in the window, a faint double overlaid on the wintering shrubs. "You used my name this morning," I said. I let the sentence arrive calmly like a plate set down without clatter. She turned glass in hand. "What?" "You authorized a listing through Harbor Bright. You signed electronically for key transfer." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Mom. No. That must be a mistake. I have a social media manager. She handles my emails. She clicks things. She probably clicked something wrong." "I do not believe your social media manager has access to my lender, my cottage, or my signature," I said. "And I do not believe she knows the old lock code printed on the card tacked inside the pantry door." Her face leaked impatience. "You seriously think I would sign your name? Why would I even want the cottage rented? It's drafty and far. Cleaning fees are insane. Money is more persuasive when it speaks to someone else's mouth," I said. "And distance is shorter when the drive runs through a need." She set the glass down too hard. Water slopped onto the counter and found the dish towel. I pressed the cloth against the ring she left a small domestic truce. No one applauded. The rosemary sprig on the sill lifted in the draft and then fell still. "You're doing the thing," she said. "You talk like a judge, so I sound childish. I am talking like a woman who has learned not to argue with weather," I said. "Or with math." Her nail touched the counter, a small tap-tap of impatience. "This is control. You want to control us even now. Lock everything up and make me grovel. That's not love." I looked at her, really looked. The lipstick chosen to be unremarkable, the sweater that cost more than the gasket for the boiler, the hands that had held my wrists when she was a toddler, trusting me to cross streets and name birds. How far a wrist can travel in a life. "I have no interest in groveling," I said, "in either direction. I am interested in accuracy. You did not call. You did not come." This morning, while I stood in a room and let silence speak for what we built, someone used my name to move strangers toward a door that still remembers your father's shoulders. Those are facts. "Marcus said this would happen," she said. "He said grief makes you dramatic." My phone vibrated once on the table, a small tremor in the wood. I did not pick it up. Jenna's gaze slid to it and back. She took a breath that wanted to be measured and failed halfway through. "You're making Noah the hero," she said. "You always pick a favorite. You think he's pure because he listens to your old stories and pretends to like tea. He's 19. He will sell that cottage for a motorcycle the second you turn your back." "Then it is good. I said that the paperwork is smarter than any of us." She smiled, but the smile did not commit. "You think paper will save you from your children. I think paper will save my grandchildren from my children," I said. She moved toward the doorway, the tote bag swiping the chair in a soft reprimand. "I am going to give you a chance to fix this before people find out how vindictive you've become. I will tell everyone you were confused and an attorney took advantage of you. You did not mean to start a fight. You will rescind whatever you signed. We will sit with a neutral party and decide what is fair." "Fair," I said. A word so overused it now means whatever is in the mouth that says it. "Meaning equal," she snapped. "Meaning earned," I said. Her eyes hardened. "You've always loved making things difficult. That cottage was never yours alone. It was our summers, too. We painted the shutters. You painted your names on the underside of the porch," I said. "With chalk I bought." She smirked. "Sentimental. Do you want a medal for supporting your family? That is what mothers do. That is what mothers did," I said. "This mother has retired from being a bank." She picked up her bag. The perfume moved with her, bright and relentless. "Then enjoy your empty holidays. Enjoy your tea with a teenager who will outgrow you. Enjoy your paperwork. Maybe you can frame it and hang it where the family pictures used to be." The phone vibrated again. I slid it toward me with 2 fingers and glanced at the screen. Noah. One line, a sentence that found the exact part of me that had not chosen anything out of anger. "Saw Mom at the cottage last night with Aunt Kara. Tried the old code. It didn't work. They left. Sorry." I set the phone face down. The room did not change temperature, which is how you know you are telling the truth. Jenna had seen my look. What she asked. "Nothing you don't already know," I said. She shifted her weight. "If you're implying I broke into your precious cottage, I will leave right now." "I don't imply," I said. "I mail." She blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means you will receive a letter by certified mail describing what is and is not permitted with respect to that property. It will arrive with a number you can track and a green card you will sign. I will keep that card. It will be placed in a folder with documents that will outlast any story we are tempted to tell about what happened here." "You're threatening me," she said. "I am informing you," I said. Her mouth made a shape and then closed. The hinge clicked again in the quiet, a small punctuation mark at the end of nothing. She looked at the cupboard door as if she could shame it into stillness. "I hope you feel powerful," she said, and the word powerful came out thin as thread. "No," I said. "I feel accurate." She stared at me like a person encountering a foreign language and refusing a dictionary. She pushed the sunglasses back onto her head. The motion loosened a strand of hair, and she caught it with a finger that shook just slightly. "You are going to regret this. People will talk. They will say you turned on your own children." "Let them talk," I said. "They weren't there yesterday." We stood until standing felt like its own argument. She lifted her bag, and the tote strap thudded a small protest against the table. She took 2 steps and then turned back because she had been a child who needed the last word in every game, and because adults rarely retire from their favorite positions. "You never say what you want," she said. "You think silence makes you noble. It just makes you impossible." "I want to be left to make tea in peace," I said. "I want the cottage to remain what it has been, a place where we do not sell rooms by the night. I want Noah to believe he can build something in steadiness. I want you to do what you like somewhere that is not my kitchen." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Fine," she said. "We'll see." "We will," I said. She left without slamming the door. That is a skill we learn in nicer neighborhoods. The house accepted the withdrawal of sound and settled back into its own small music. I took the dish towel to the spill she had left and pressed until the ring vanished. Then I rinsed the cloth beneath cold water and wrung it out until it dripped clean. I hung it on the oven handle and smoothed the edge with my palm. The phone lay where I had placed it. I picked it up and typed 1 sentence to Noah. "Thank you for telling me." The words looked insufficient and exactly right. He wrote back almost at once. "Do you need me to come by?" "Not yet," I answered. "Soon." I set the phone down. The hinge whispered when the heater exhaled. I went to the sideboard and touched the folder with the trust's name on the front, the paper warm now from where the house had held it. On the dish beside the boat key, Aisha's card lay white and unbothered. I slid the green return receipt beside it. The small altar looked complete for the moment. In the window, the rosemary held steady in its glass. Outside, the wind reached the dock bell and asked a single question. The bell answered once and then rested. The bank faced the harbor as if it took its poise from water. Glass panes tall as sails, brass handles that remembered gloves. Inside, the air kept its own temperature, lemon and quiet, the kind of quiet that lets shoes be the loudest thing. A man at the reception desk stood when I gave my name. "Mr. Green will be right with you." His voice had the polish of someone who has learned how not to hurry in front of money. Mr. Green came out exactly on time, gray suit that did not apologize for gray tie, nodded with intention. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, and gestured to an office whose window framed a slice of the harbor so perfectly it might have been arranged. The desk held a tidy stack of forms and a pen with the bank's name stamped along its length, as if ink needed a reminder of where it lived. "I'll use my own," I said, and set Aisha's Parker on the blotter. His glance skimmed the pen, and to his credit returned to my face. Of course. He had read the notes Aisha sent. I could tell by the way he positioned the document's beneficiary change requests on top, online access adjustments, beneath a small stack of one-time password devices boxed in neat plastic at the side, like party favors for a very serious party. "We'll begin with beneficiary designations," he said. "Then we'll restrict and verify access points for all accounts. We'll add physical two-factor tokens to replace text messaging. We'll disable phone-based resets. I'm also recommending we remove voice authorization. Too many households think a surname is a key." He slid the first form across. "Account ending in 412. Designated beneficiary, Whitfield Coastal Trust." A line waited for my signature. I looked out at the winter water and then wrote my name. He initialed, timestamped the desk, a small orchestra of minimal sounds. When the second form came, the process repeated. By the third, our bodies had learned each other's timing, my pen following the stamp, his stamp following my pen, the paper sliding back and forth like a steady tide. He turned to his computer, and the monitor angled toward us both. "We're going to the access profile now." His fingers moved with care. "Currently, your accounts allow password reset by email and by SMS. We'll remove those. We'll set up hardware tokens. These will be seeded here and never mailed to your home. You'll keep one. I'll keep one locked pending your written request. If someone tells us they're your son and the situation is urgent, they will learn that urgency is not a credential." He opened a drawer and placed a small black device on the blotter. It was the size of a postage stamp with a screen that woke to 6 numbers. "Press to generate a code. The code lives for 30 seconds. We won't store the seed on any profile. If your token is lost, you will appear in person with ID. We will verify with your attorney and use what we call a slow path. Slow is safe." He set a second token aside. "Backup," he said. "It will live in the vault under your name with a note that it is not to be released to any family member." He did not look at me for approval. He clicked a box, typed a note I could not see from my angle, and hit enter. Somewhere in the bank, a line of text learned to refuse a familiar last name. He printed a report of online users and slid it across. "This shows devices that have accessed your profile in the last 90 days. You'll note a pattern of your laptop and phone. There is one entry at 10 past 11 last night from a mobile device we don't recognize. Location suggests an address near the bait shop. We can't tell who held the phone. We can tell it tried to change settings and failed at the security question. Could be coincidence, could be practice." I turned the page and the numbers repeated their calm confession. "Thank you," I said. My voice had learned the shape of thanks used for doors that shut properly. He looked toward the forms again. "You'll also want to revoke any convenience signers you may have had in older years. I see none listed, which is excellent. But we'll add an internal note that no third-party initiations are to be honored, absent written instruction on your letterhead with your counsel copied. If a representative calls and mentions family, we will treat that as a cue to slow down, not speed up." "Good," I said. He met my eyes as if he were about to deliver the kind of news people either handle or don't. I should tell you that a man named Whitfield did call this morning using your last name with confidence. He wanted to restore his access as your helper. He suggested you would approve once you had a minute. We took his number and assured him we would review the account. We did not call him back. What number, I asked. He read it aloud. It was Marcus's. The digits sat in my mind like a stone finally labeled. I nodded once. Please note that phone number on your internal "do not disclose" list. He typed and hit enter. The sound of the key was very small and very satisfying. We moved to the brokerage account. The woman assigned to that side of the bank joined us, hair in a tidy knot that could stand in a crosswind. She brought a separate form nearly identical in its appetite for initials. The trust as beneficiary, she confirmed. And you will sign as you just did. We'll add my back office note now to revoke the previous pay-on-death instructions. Confirmation will arrive by mail. I'll also email your attorney today. I signed. They stamped. She requested an ID scan and took the cards away with the care of a librarian. When she returned, she placed a printout in the stack. Our system has a little lag, she said, but the designation will be live within the hour. Mr. Green turned to the package of tokens. He peeled the plastics on one and handed it to me. Press to wake it. Try a code. I pressed. The numbers brightened. He asked me to read them, typed them into a field, nodded when the system accepted me. That's it, he said. The simplicity almost felt indecent. We went through a script for emergencies. If you suspect anyone has accessed your accounts, you will call this number, he said, circling a printed line. You will say, Recital 156. That tells our people to authenticate you with out-of-band procedures. We will not ask your mother's maiden name. We will ask you to read a code we mailed to you last year. It is in a blue envelope you probably filed because you are the sort of person who files the kinds of envelopes most people recycle. I said. He smiled almost. I could tell. When the printing finished, he gathered the confirmations into a folder and wrote the date on the tab with an elegant hand. He slid it to me with a small bow that felt earned. We'll walk these to back office now, he said. If anyone calls pretending to be anyone with good intentions, we will be polite and immovable. As we walked through the lobby, a woman at the teller line dropped a coin. It rang on the tile, a clean, bright sound that made heads turn. She stooped and retrieved it with a laugh she meant to share. I thought of how noise behaves in different rooms, and how clarity has a tone too. On the street, the wind had freshened enough to put teeth in it. I crossed to the post office with the folder under my arm. The door swung heavy and warm air smelling faintly of ink and paper, and winter clothing received me. A clerk with a red cardigan and practical glasses greeted me with the kind of nod reserved for regulars and solemn tasks. What can we do for you today? Certified mail, I said. 3 letters. I set the envelopes on the counter, one addressed to my son, one to my daughter, one to Harbor Bright's legal department. The clerk laid out the green cards like a dealer who believes in the rules of the game. Return receipt requested, she said, and slid a pen across. I filled the lines with careful letters, names printed plainly, my address written with a steadiness that surprised me. She stamped each card with a number that will live longer than apologies. Do you want restricted delivery? She asked. Addressee only. Yes, I said. Addressee only. She affixed the stickers with practiced thumbs and applied clear tape over each, sealing them the way sailors seal lines, not fancy, just thorough. You'll get these green cards back signed, she said. Sometimes people scribble, sometimes they print, sometimes they refuse, and we note that too. The system remembers all of it. She stamped the date on each letter, a firm red mark like a drumbeat. I paid and took the receipts, the paper warm from friction. I slipped them into a small envelope with today's date. The clerk pushed a dish of paper clips toward me. Take 2, she said. One always runs off. Outside, the day had shifted. A narrow band of sunlight broke under the cloud line and turned the water to tarnished silver. I stood for a moment on the post office steps with the receipts in my pocket, thumb pressing one edge like a worry stone. The bell down the hill answered a wind I could not feel yet. I headed home with the folder hugged to my side and the little black token in my coat pocket ticking its soft numbers to itself. Back in the kitchen, the house exhaled the kind of welcome that requires nothing. I set the bank folder on the sideboard beside Aisha's and put the hardware token in the ceramic dish with the boat key. It did not look like much, and that pleased me. Power that does not preen can be trusted. I opened my laptop and watched emails arrive. Aisha's assistant sent copies of the spoliation letter to Harbor Bright, the preservation request to the bank and brokerage, and perfunctory courtesies to the platform's compliance inbox. Another message held PDFs of the forms I had just signed. A third confirmed that the deed transfer package was ready for signature tomorrow. I downloaded everything and saved them to the folder named for Victory in a language only I speak. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. The message arrived a minute later, Marcus's voice pitched low, trying for calm and landing on practiced. "Mom, we need to talk. You're making a mistake with all this. Mr. Green called me back, so I know you've been there. I was just trying to help you streamline. With everything happening, you shouldn't be carrying this alone. Call me." I forwarded the voicemail to Aisha without comment. Then I wrote a line to Mr. Green thanking him for his discretion and confirming he should redirect any family calls to counsel. He replied within 5 minutes. "Understood. Noted on profile. We've added a flag requiring attorney of record for any changes or discussions not initiated by you in person." I stood at the sink and ran water just to hear it behave in a straight line. The rosemary on the sill had begun to droop, so I refreshed the glass, the stems darkening as they drank. I thought of the green cards moving through the system, making their small progress in sacks and trucks being scanned and passed along. Somewhere a machine would read a barcode, and a dot on a map would move a step closer to my children's doors. Evening edged in. I clicked on the small lamp, and the room caught its soft amber. The urn kept its unobtrusive watch. I drew the little shadow box from the drawer, the one Alan made when he decided small keepsakes should have a theater. Inside, I placed the first return receipt from today's letters, copy a placeholder for what would arrive signed, and next to it, I set the token for a second. The brass boat key lay above a line of light along its worn curve. It looked like a diagram of order key-proof tool. The kettle clicked off. I poured water over tea and listened for that gentle change in sound when the leaf surrenders to heat. I carried the cup to the table and set it on the cork ring Alan had sanded years ago. My hand found the pen without thinking and rested on it like a small flag. No one knocked. No one called my name from the driveway. The town went on cataloging itself in ordinary ways. Somewhere a courier checked his route. Somewhere a clerk initialed a bin and moved it to evening dispatch. Somewhere a man who knew my last name discovered that doors no longer opened when he introduced himself with it. I took a sip of tea. The temperature was right. The day had been altered by paper and care. That is sometimes all a life requires to turn toward its own shape again. Tessa arrived without a ceremony, the doorbell a brief polite note that did not expect music after it. When I opened, she stood on the mat with a pie in a plastic clamshell and a scarf that had lost the battle with the wind. No car idled in the drive. She must have parked up the street the way people do when they are not sure if they are welcome. "It's apple," she said, lifting the box as if the gift could explain the visit. "From the market. I didn't bake." Honesty first, which was a surprise. "Come in," I said. I stepped back. The house let her pass without changing its face. In the kitchen, she set the pie on the counter and loosened her scarf. Her hair had been hurried into a knot that would not survive heavy weather. She kept her bag close to her side, as if afraid the room might borrow from her. We faced each other with the table between us, like a broker we both trusted. "I won't stay long," she said. I didn't want to text. I thought it should be said where sentences have somewhere to sit down. I gestured to the chair. She remained standing. "Fine. There are conversations best handled on your feet." I heard about the trust she began measuring the word, as if it might sting. "Marcus is furious. He thinks you are being influenced. He asked me to come and talk sense into you." She glanced up. "That is not why I'm here." The radiator gave its small sigh. I waited. "I'm here to say thank you," she said, and the phrase landed with its full weight. "For not putting his name on anything else. For stopping this before he drags you into a mess you didn't make." She opened her bag with a careful hand and drew out a thin folder, the cheap kind you buy in a hurry. Inside were 3 pages. She slid them across to me like a confession that had been washed and dried but not pressed. Bank statements, a credit line agreement from a lender I recognized from grocery store flyers, and a single-page notice of a UCC filing against Marcus's business equipment from last spring. He told me it was temporary, she said. A bridge. He has a talent for bridges. They are always beautiful in his mouth. She caught her breath and let it out smaller. He used our house for a second mortgage 2 years ago. I signed because the roof needed replacing, and because I was still under the impression that paper could be reasoned with after the fact. I looked at the figures. The interest rate wore its own kind of threat. She pointed to a deposit from 3 months ago. That's when he sold the boat. He told Noah they donated it to a charity program. I didn't correct him. That is mine to answer for. The pie sat between us like a prop the scene didn't require. She touched the edge of the plastic, then withdrew her hand. He has been circling your cottage for months, she said. He calls it underutilized. He says sentimental assets are lazy assets. He thinks if it works for the internet, it must be wise. Was he at the cottage last night, I asked. I kept my voice balanced the way you set a level on a shelf to see what reality prefers. Her eyes dropped. He tried the old code. I told him it was a mistake, that we were breaking something that wasn't furniture. He said I was being dramatic. We left when it didn't open. I should have brought him home without going there. That is also mine. I picked up the credit line agreement again and pinched the corner more to feel the paper than to steady it. The numbers were not ruinous. They were greedy. Greed is a quieter destroyer than people like to admit. Marcus called the bank this morning, I said. He tried to restore access. Of course he did, she said, and the phrase belonged to fatigue rather than contempt. He believes in the power of sounding sure. He has been rewarded for it enough times to mistake the rewards for proof. She made a small sound that was not quite a laugh. He told me last week that he is the only adult in the family. The irony ordered itself. She reached into her wallet and took out a photograph I had not seen in years. Noah on the old swing behind the cottage legs, straight head tipped back in triumph, one shoelace unconvincingly tied. The corners were soft with handling. I keep this, she said. It reminds me of a day I did something right. You have done many things right, I said. It was not kindness. It was inventory. She slid the photo back, the gesture careful, as if the paper could wince. I wanted to tell you something before he does. He will likely say I am undermining him. Maybe I am, but I am done letting undermining masquerade as loyalty. He approached a local agent about flipping the cottage in the spring. He did not tell you because he thought if he presented it as half decided, you would concede the other half to avoid noise. She fixed her gaze on a place over my shoulder where the wall had once held a calendar. He is wrong about many things, but mostly he is wrong about who you are. I appreciate knowing I said. The kettle clicked from habit and stopped before making an argument of it. I did not move to make tea. Not yet. There's one more practical thing, she said. This is the only advice I will risk giving you without being invited. If the trust is not yet holding the deed, do it now. Record it. Do not wait for anyone to approve your grief. Add a life estate for yourself so it cannot be confused later. People tell themselves lies with great eloquence when the law leaves them room. It will be signed tomorrow, I said. Recorded within the week, barring a snowstorm or a clerk falling ill. I watched her shoulders lose an invisible weight they had carried up my steps. Good, she said. Then my coming here did not waste your time. She hesitated. There will be noise. He will try to shame you in public and beg you in private. He will use my voice if I let him. I am not letting him. But my saying that out loud is not the same as always succeeding at it. You can put my name on your refusal if you need ballast, I said. Say your mother-in-law is stubborn and impossible and your hands are tied. I do not require reputation to be useful. Her mouth quirked something like humor passing through the room without claiming it. I may borrow that. Though for what it's worth, impossible is not the word I'd choose. She lifted her eyes. He will tell people you are cruel. He will forget to list the checks you wrote with no questions asked, the rides, the sitting up in waiting rooms, the years you turned on lights for children who did not check who had paid the bill. People will choose the version that offends them least. That is not your business anymore. We let that stand between us like a newly installed post that wasn't going anywhere. The light had begun to thin, the kind of late afternoon that makes tile look colder than it is. Tessa looked toward the window and then back at me. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I thought it would be meddling. But then I thought about Noah. He came by last week when the faucet under our sink turned traitor. He showed up with a wrench that looked older than his textbooks and fixed the leak without telling a story about it. He dried the floor and left a towel out for me, and he apologized to the pipes as if that were good manners. Marcus has not noticed that the boy is not his younger self. You have. You are not wrong to trust him. I am trusting the structure more than the person I said, but the person makes the structure worth building." She nodded. "I know. I remember being 19. I made promises to rooms and broke them by breakfast. But Noah apologizes to plumbing. That has to count for something." We both smiled and then we didn't. She pulled her scarf up and looped it once. Her fingers shook a little. "I should go. He will notice I am gone and begin to invent purposes for my absence. Do you want me to walk you to your car?" I asked. "No. I'm 2 houses up. I wanted the space to decide whether to ring your bell." She picked up the pie, then set it down again. "Keep it. Maybe Noah will come by this week and you can add cinnamon to whatever the market underpaid for." "I'll save a slice," I said. She turned to leave, then paused. "One last thing. If he summons you to a family meeting, don't go. Meetings are arenas he stages. He prefers crowds. He thinks truth is a numbers game. Make him right. Words look different when they have to hold a stamp." I tipped my head. "I have envelopes." "I know," she said. She touched the back of the chair, a light, absent-minded pat, the way someone reassures a dog when exiting a room. At the door, she stopped herself and looked at me properly, as if memorizing a detail in case she needed it later. "You're not doing this to win," she said. "That's why it's going to work." When the door closed behind her, the house recovered its own pressure. I carried the pie to the refrigerator and made space beside a jar of jam and 2 lemons. On the counter, the folder Tessa had brought lay open, the numbers dry as salt. I slid the pages into my binder under a tab I labeled with the day's date. Then I took out the small shadow box and added nothing to it, because sometimes restraint is also a record. Outside, a car door shut softly. Footsteps moved up the sidewalk and faded. The kettle had cooled and would have to be coaxed again. I filled it and set it back the metal, finding the ring with its familiar landing. I took the photograph from my memory rather than the drawer. Noah in midair, the swings chain taut, his grin uncomplicated the sky behind him without intention. It was a good picture. It promised nothing eternal. It did not need to. Before the water could complain, I dialed Aisha and left a message for her assistant. "Please add to file copies of statements from Marcus's accounts provided by Tessa. Note, attempted listing timeline consistent with our logs. Proceed with recording deed as soon as signed." I hung up and stood with my hands on the counter palms, flat, the surface cool and even. Through the window, the harbor lay like a held breath. The bell down the hill waited for a reason to speak. In the dish by the door, the hardware token slept beside the boat key. On the sideboard, the folder with the trust name warmed under the lamp. The house felt organized not by objects so much as by intention. Tessa had called it winning. She was wrong. It was simply finishing what love begins, when love remembers to use its hands. Noah's envelope arrived at 10 the next morning, tucked between a grocery flyer and a notice about storm parking. The paper was the kind you buy at a campus bookstore, a little too white corners soft from being carried in a jacket pocket. He prints like a careful draftsman who hasn't decided if he wants to be one. I stood by the sink and slit it with the back of a butter knife. "Grandma, I'm writing because I didn't find the words when I saw you. I didn't know he was that sick. I didn't know he was gone. I'm sorry I wasn't at the memorial. I should have been. I don't have a reason, only a regret. If the cottage is still ours, I would like to help you keep it as a place people walk toward, not through. Maybe the porch could be a small reading place, a shelf where someone takes a book and leaves another. I can build the box if you want. I don't know much, but I can learn. I miss him. I miss how quiet felt around him. I love you. Noah." I read it twice, then turned it over like an old coin and read the imprint the third time through the shadow of my hand. The lines pressed a faint relief into the paper. He'd written hard enough to leave ridges. It's how boys make promises when they are still learning about tone. I set the letter on the table, weighed its edge with a salt cellar, and called him. He answered on the first ring with a soft, "Hey," as if he were already in the room and only needed to be located. "Do you have classes today?" I asked. "Not till late. Studio hours. I can push them." "Don't push anything," I said. "Just come after lunch. Bring your jacket. Bring the screwdriver you like." He arrived in the clean cold of early afternoon hair damp from a shower jeans, near frozen from the walk up the hill. He stamped his feet on the mat and brushed a sleeve against the doorframe the way people do when they want to be careful with edges. His hug was taller than the last one. It fit differently. I let it. "You look good," he said, then immediately looked ashamed of the mismatch between compliment and circumstance. "It's fine to say," I said. "We can hold more than one thing at once." We stood in the kitchen several seconds longer than necessary, letting the heater tick through a cycle, letting the rosemary lift and fall in the glass. He glanced toward the sideboard. The urn sat where it had been set. He nodded to it a small salute and didn't try for words. "I got your letter," I said. "It's on the table if you want to pretend you didn't write it so you can admire the penmanship." He smiled the way a boy does when he's grateful you are making fun of him instead of his grief. "I pressed too hard," he said. "It reads like you meant it," I said. "That's good pressure." I made tea for me and poured lemonade for him because the child who once drank from a green plastic cup still lives inside the adult who now pretends to appreciate bergamot. We stood with our glasses and looked at the backyard. The lilac bushes held a gray architecture. The porch rail leaned in a way that turned patina into hazard. He tapped the wood with his knuckle. "That's going," he said. "The bracket's loosened. See the hairline there?" He crouched and traced a line in the grain so thin I would have mistaken it for shadow. "If we don't fix it, somebody will lean on it, and the whole thing will speak louder than you want it to." "I prefer the house whisper," I said. "What do you need?" "I'll level a box of 2-inch screws, the driver maybe a brace, and a pencil. Old school." I fetched the old orange level from the basement and the tin of screws Alan had labeled with a blue marker that survived every season. Noah set everything out on the porch as if each piece deserved introduction. He asked me to hold the rail while he backed the old screws out. They resisted in that reluctant theatrical way older fasteners do, squeaking a little as if to register their protest for the record. He kept up a low talk I remembered from years ago, quiet apologies to wood and metal. "Sorry, friend. I know you've done your time." I left him with the rail and went inside to preheat the oven. My hands wanted a task that made heat and smell. I pulled the recipe card for ginger cookies from the cookbook, the one with Alan's notes in parentheses. "Add more molasses if the day feels sharp." It was his handwriting square, and certain the same letters that labeled the file drawers. I measured and sifted and let butter soften and sugar meet it. The mixer's hum was a human sound, purposeful without being loud. When the first tray went in, I carried 2 mugs to the porch. He had the bracket cleaned and the pilot holes marked. He held the level against the post and waited for the bubble to behave. "It's close," he said, "but let me shim it a hair." He showed me the sliver of cedar he kept in his pocket for moments like this. He slid it in, checked again, made a satisfied noise that sounded like approval and memory at once. "He taught me this," he said. "If a thing wants to lean, give it something honest to lean against." "He said that about people too," I said. He sank the first screw with the driver wrist steady pressure even. The bite into fresh wood gave that satisfying low buzz that traveled up the arms. The second screw settled home with less talk. He handed me the driver for the third. "You try," he said. "Just press and listen. The tool tells you when you're right." I lined the bit, braced my feet, and pressed. The driver rose a pitch, then found its register. The screw drew the 2 faces together until the seam closed, and the wood made a tiny sound like breath releasing. We both heard it. "There," he said gently. "Now the house can put weight there again." We tested the rail. It held the way a promise should. The porch felt more itself by a degree you couldn't see from the street, but would feel with your hand if you reached out in the dark. "Cookies in 10, I said. "Wash up." He went to the sink and scrubbed hard, getting the threads of dust from his nails the way Alan had insisted on before meals. He reached for a towel and then stopped. "I'll shake," he said, and flicked his hands over the basin one more time. The small discipline of a person trying to keep a good room good. We carried the cookies to the table on a sheet of parchment steam, rising like well-behaved ghosts. He took one, let it cool on his palm, and then bit in. "You added pepper," he said, surprised, but not offended. "Alan's winter trick," I said. "Wakes the edges." We ate 3 each because there are rules you're allowed to write when you're supervising your own appetite. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded graph paper sketch. "If you want that reading shelf," he said, pushing it across. "I thought we could make it from scrap. A little roof plexi door, the kind of hinge that doesn't mind the salt air. Put it on a post out front. Leave a note that rudeness will be returned to sender." "Who writes the note?" I asked. "You," he said. "Your handwriting is scarier than mine." We laughed, and the laugh did not feel like betrayal. He stood to stretch, and his knee knocked the underside of the stair where the riser meets the stringer. A dull clack answered, not wood against wood, but wood against something that had spent its life pretending not to be there. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "I did," I said. I crouched and rapped the spot again, the same clack. He pried gently with his fingertips and found a sliver that would give. He slid the flathead in, eased the strip back a 1/4 inch, then another. Dust whispered out. Something pale lay tucked in the narrow cavity, wrapped in brown paper and bound with twine gone gray with age. He pulled it free with the care you bring to birds. He looked at me. "Yours," he said. I set it on the table and untied the softened twine. The paper lifted without tearing. Inside lay a note on the back of an old hardware invoice. Alan's block print held like a stonemason's work. "If you find yourself small, choose the larger quiet. It is not retreat, it is room." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Check the hook." I stood and reached for the boat key by the back door. I lifted it from its hook and ran my thumb along the wood. Something resisted. The hook assembly had a second plate. I pressed and felt a click I'd never noticed. The little brass face slid upward 1/2 inch, revealing a shallow niche. Inside, a green return receipt sat folded to the size of a postage stamp with a date from the year our mortgage was paid. Beneath it, a tiny slip of paper with one word, "Kept." I held the scraps in my palm, suddenly aware of the long continuity of simple systems. "He hid this 20 years ago," I said. "Either for mischief or for me." "Both," Noah said softly. He liked building pockets into things. He said a house should have places to store certainty. We set the relics in the shadow box. The green slip looked absurd and holy in the same frame. The brass key glinted as if flattered by new company. Noah stood back and took the whole in. "He would have told us to stop making a shrine and start sweeping," he said. "He would," I said. "And then he would have swept and called it a ceremony." We went outside with a broom and a dustpan and set about making the porch behave. He knocked the grit from the corners, carried the old screws to the tin, and tucked the shim into his pocket like a coin he intended to spend wisely. I wiped the rail where our hands had been working and watched the grain darken and then return as the cloth dried. "About the shelf," he said as we stacked the broom. "I can start Saturday. I'll bring scrap from the shop. If we can't find plexi, we can use old window glass and put a lip around it. People will break things. People will repair them. That can be part of the instructions." "I have a box of paperbacks that have been waiting for an excuse to go outside," I said. "We'll write rules that fit on one line." He nodded. "Take one leave, one be decent." "That's 3, I said. "Then we'll make the line longer," he said. "It's a wide street." We went back inside. The cookies had cooled enough to lose their steam, but not their comfort. He took another and broke it in half. He slid his half across the table to me and took the smaller piece. I pretended not to notice the arithmetic that favored me. Before he left, he stood by the sideboard and looked at the urn, the key, the little shadow box with its green slip, and the new blank waiting to be filled by whatever arrives, signed with a name I taught. He touched the edge of the frame with one finger, the way a person greets a sleeping animal. "I'm sorry I didn't come," he said, voice low, as if he didn't want to wake anything. "I'm sorry I didn't know." "You know now," I said. That's the only time worth showing up in." He nodded, pulled on his jacket, and tucked the screwdriver into the inner pocket. It made a small, honest shape there. At the door, he hesitated. "Need anything before Saturday?" "Bring 2 book titles you think a stranger should read when they are waiting for the bus," I said. "And bring the pencil." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." I watched him cross the yard, steady on the new rail shoulders, set against the wind that comes off the water, with no intention of compromise. The bell down the hill gave one short call and then quieted. I stood with my palm flat on the table, feeling the house remember the moment a hinge held differently, the moment a note stepped out of wood, the moment a boy's letter asked to be answered by things that can be built. Marcus arrived with a man who introduced himself as Caldwell and did not offer a first name. He wore a navy blazer that had opinions and a smile meant to soften invoices. They stood on the mat as if they were waiting for applause. I opened the door wide enough for them to understand they were not welcome to linger in the threshold. "We need a rational conversation," Marcus said, stepping past me into the kitchen with the confidence of someone who has not recently been told no. Caldwell followed, setting a leather folio on the table, as if the folio could deputize him. I gestured to the chairs. They remained standing. Fine. Gravity would do its work without furniture. "You've been misled." "Mom?" Marcus began, palms open. "This whole trust thing, the beneficiary changes, the bank told me you were there. It's unnecessary. We can keep things simple. You appoint me to help. I stabilize the cottage. We monetize when appropriate. Everyone wins." Caldwell nodded at each phrase a man paid to choreograph agreement. "Families do better when they stay liquid," he added. "Sentiment is admirable, but liquidity is protective." I walked to the sideboard, lifted the folder labeled with the trust's name, and set it on the table. I placed my pen upon it and rested a hand on the cover until the paper warmed. "You are here to demand access," I said. "You will leave with clarity." Marcus put on the injured expression he has used since childhood when the world fails to rearrange itself. "I am here to protect you." "You tried to restore your access with the bank this morning," I said. "They declined and noted your number." I saw the flicker in his eyes that meant he recognized the number as evidence rather than fact. "You also attempted to key into the cottage last night with an old code. You were not invited." "Who told you that?" he said too quickly. Caldwell lifted a hand to quiet him and smiled at me like a person soothing a skittish animal. "We are not here to debate minor misunderstandings," he said. "We are here to resolve exposure. Without you, certain obligations come due. We can help you avoid unpleasantness." "Exposure has already been resolved," I said. I opened the folder and slid out the certified mail receipts, their numbers in a neat column. "Notice has been sent. Logs have been preserved. Deed package is prepared. Beneficiary designations have been changed. 2-factor hardware is in effect. Voice authorization is revoked. There is nothing here that requires your assistance." Marcus made a scoffing sound. "Hardware. Mom! This is exactly what I mean. You're letting the attorney scare you with gadgets. You don't know password hygiene. Let me take this on. It's time." Caldwell cleared his throat. "There is also the matter of fairness. Your will names your children. Moving everything out of reach into a trust overnight raises questions. Judges dislike last-minute maneuvers." I turned to him and let my eyes rest. Judges dislike sloppy paper and coercion. They respect irrevocable instruments executed with counsel and intent. They also respect no-contest clauses. I reached for the will and tapped the new page. "If either of you contests without probable cause, the remainder you might have received under the will is forfeited. There is a legal term for your strategy. It is expensive." Caldwell's smile thinned. "You are leaving yourself open to influence claims. An attorney could use words like undue. A jury might sympathize with children. I am the grantor," I said, "the trustee, the occupant with a recorded life estate. I met with counsel without your presence. I signed in an office with a notary. The trust has an independent protector. The bank has flagged my profile requiring attorney of record for amendments. If you wish to argue influence, you will be arguing against systems designed to resist you." Marcus set both hands on the back of a chair as if to keep it from running off. "We are your children," he said, softening his voice, reaching for a younger version of himself who once got what he wanted by sounding tired. Dad would have wanted us to handle this. Your father wanted you at his memorial, I said. You were at a vineyard. Work, he said. Then consider this work, I said. Caldwell opened his folio and produced a sheet that loved its own bullet points. Let us propose a compromise. You keep the cottage for 2 years under oversight. We take a small rental listing during high season. You receive a guaranteed monthly check. After 24 months, we reevaluate. You've enjoyed the place enough. The equity can begin serving your family. The equity is already employed, I said. It is shelter. It is boundary. It is memory kept in wood. And for the avoidance of any confusion, there will be no strangers in that house. You're being punitive, Marcus said. Against me? Against Jenna. Accuracy is not punishment, I said. The phone on the counter lit with a ring. Jenna's name showed. I let it ring twice, then answered and put it on speaker. You're on with your brother and a friend, I said. How convenient, she said, voice tight. Perfect. You can all hear me say this is out of control. You cannot cut us off and hand everything to a child. It's embarrassing. People are asking questions. People will be informed by mail, I said. God, she said. The mail again. I am not signing your little cards. You are free to refuse, I said. The postal service will note the refusal. Caldwell leaned in. Jenna, he said friendly to the point of condescension, we are trying to keep your mother from unnecessary exposure. Can you come here so we can talk as a group? No, she said. I have a call in 10 with a brand. Also, Mom. Noah is not to go to the cottage. We do not need him inflaming this. He listens to you and then runs errands like a golden retriever, and the whole town watches. Her voice wavered. A sound came through that was not speech, the little hiccup the throat makes when a person tries to swallow both anger and shame. A second tone chimed and she muttered, Hang on to someone else in another room. The phone shifted. Screens will betray even careful people if you give them a second. For a heartbeat, her camera turned, and I saw the edge of her laptop open to a chat thread. Noah's name circled in blue at the top. The last line visible before she recovered the angle was hers. Do not go today. It's handled. We don't need a funeral scene. The timestamp placed it an hour before the memorial. The room went very still. Marcus pulled his hands from the chair back and placed them flat upon his own chest, as if his ribs had cooled. Caldwell looked at the floor in that expert way people look at floors when they intend to pretend they saw nothing. Jenna recovered the camera, unaware of what she had shown. Anyway, she said too brightly, I have to jump. You did not come, I said into the phone. You told him not to come. I did not raise my voice. I put no heat into the lines. Heat is wasted on people who worship interruptions. I laid the fact down like a stone. Silence. Then the brittle laugh she uses to bridge to a different topic. You're making this theatrical, she said. You love a reveal. I ended the call. The disconnect tone behaved like a period. Marcus found a version of his voice that wanted to be diplomatic. That screen meant nothing, he said. You know how texts pile up. You can't judge her by a peek of something. I have not judged her, I said. I have structured around her. Caldwell cleared his throat again. Let us move from sentiment to law, he said, reaching for dry land. Our firm has had success challenging late-stage changes on the basis of capacity. A small part of me admired his persistence. I am capable, I said. If you doubt it, file. The no contest clause will greet you. He raised both hands as if surrender were a theatrical pose available to him. We are not here to threaten. We are here to persuade. Then you have finished, I said. Marcus took a step toward me that was not aggressive so much as unpracticed. He had forgotten the exact geography of my kitchen, which corners allow you to stand and be forgiven, and which corners do not. You are breaking this family, he said. You are building a narrative where we are villains. You will regret freezing out your own children when you need us. I needed you yesterday, I said. You had a tasting. He opened his mouth, then closed it, and tried again from a different angle, the way salesmen do when they sense the room has purchased nothing. If we contest, you will be forced to spend on lawyers. Is that what you want? To give your money to a stranger in a suit? I already gave my money to a stranger in a suit, I said, and let the sentence sit there until the clarity of it reached him. His name is Trustee. You will meet him in writing if you continue. Caldwell lifted his folio as if accepting the verdict. "Think on this," he said, defaulting to an exit line. "Our door is open." "My door closes," I said. I walked with them to the threshold. Marcus turned when the cold hit his face. For a second, some younger plea pushed against his features habits of a boy who wanted one more chance. Then the older pose reclaimed him. "I hope your tea keeps you warm," he said. "It does," I said. "It also cools." They left. The door clicked home with a precision that pleased me. I stood with my hand on the wood until the last of their footsteps drained from the walk. The house resumed its work of being a house. The heater gave a moderate cough and then settled to a decent tempo. In the window, the rosemary bowed and lifted like a faint metronome. I returned to the table and placed the signed, certified mail receipts copy into the shadow box, leaving the top slot open for the greens that would come back to me with someone else's name leaned hard into a pen. I slid Aisha's card beside them and the little black token beside the boat key. The arrangement calmed me the way neat drawers calm certain people. It was not display. It was a diagram. On the counter, my phone lay flat, face down. I turned it over. Aisha had already replied to the voicemail I sent mid-call. "We will hold. If they file, we answer on paper, not on porches." She had attached a short note. "Good work today." She understood the kind of labor that does not stain your hands. I went to the sink and let the water run until it cleared cold. I drank a glass standing up the way Alan used to after hauling gear. The bell down the hill rang once and then quit a sound that felt like a sentence ending correctly. I dried the glass and set it in the rack. My hands trembled briefly, a small weather system passing. It left behind the air you get after a storm, the kind that smells like nothing more than itself. The light outside had taken on that particular quality late afternoons reserve for decisions. I carried the folder back to the sideboard and placed it where it lived. The urn remained steady. The boat key hung in its hook, not glinting, merely being. I touched the hook and felt for the mechanism Alan built beneath the brass. It held as it should. Kept, he had written on the slip. The word did not mean hoard. It meant honored. I sat at the table and wrote a single sentence on my legal pad in a clear hand big enough that I could read it from the doorway. No more conversations without paper. Then I set down the pen and let the quiet expand into the whole house without apology. 3 weeks of quiet taught me what peace sounds like. It is not silence. It is drawer wood gliding true. It is the soft, confirming click when a cabinet lands square on its new hinge. It is a kettle turned off before it screams because the hand watching it is paying attention. By the third Sunday, the cottage key had a new weight to it. Not heavier, just more certain of its job. Aisha's email arrived first, bright in the inbox like a buoy in good water. Recording confirmed, she wrote. Deed accepted by the county. Life estate filed. Spendthrift protections active. Bank and brokerage acknowledgments attached. She appended a single line that read like a benediction. You designed this well. The mail answered next. A stack of envelopes banded with a rubber strip lay on the table like a loaf left by an early riser. On top, 2 green return receipts waited for my hands. The first bore Marcus's signature pressed too hard, each letter gouged slightly into the card. The second came from Jenna. She had printed her name with a tidy hand and a flourish at the end, as if signatures were merely opportunities to finish pretty. I set both cards in the shadow box beneath the brass key, then slid in a small card I had written on a scrap of recipe paper. Boundaries keep love honest. The box held still complete without announcing itself. Noah came on Saturday with arms full of scrapboard and a roll of sandpaper in his pocket. The air had turned marine again, salt lifting into the yard without asking permission. He set a sawhorse on the grass and unpacked hardware like a magician revealing one trick at a time. We built the little library slowly so the wood could tell us what it wanted to be. He measured twice, cut once, and smiled at how old advice still fit new lumber. I stood beside him with the level bubble centered as if a small animal had found its nest. We hinged the plexi door and tested the swing. It closed with a dignified hush. He wrote, "Take one. Leave one. Be decent." in pencil, then traced it with a marker I fetched from the kitchen drawer that keeps pens next to elastic bands and things too useful to throw away. I wrote a second line below in smaller script. If you borrow for longer than you meant, that's all right. Bring the book back when you can. The sign looked like a conversation between two members of the same family who had learned to share a porch without tripping each other. A girl from the next street wandered up while we were placing books. She was small and stern, the age that believes rules are spells that work when spoken exactly. She ran a finger along the spine of a mystery and then looked at me with the kind of seriousness grown people borrow when they need to be believed. "Is it okay to keep something that's special to you?" she asked, not taking her hand off the book as if it might run. "It's more than okay," I said. "It's how you keep yourself." She nodded, made a ceremony of choosing, then walked away with a paperback and the attitude of someone who had signed for a package and meant to take good care of it. Noah and I pretended not to watch her turn the corner. Inside the house found a new rhythm for Saturdays. Sawdust brushed from the threshold, cookies cooling under a towel like small towns sleeping, a screwdriver set down gently where it would be found. Between tasks, an email chimed from Harbor Bright's legal department. "We have disabled the pending listing and preserved all records per council's demand," it read. Liza added a sentence that did not belong to a script. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm glad this was caught." I forwarded the note to Aisha and received back a simple "noted." Then a second message followed with a scanned copy of the charitable set-aside 10% directed to the local library's outreach program. I had added it the day before without telling anyone. Alan used to volunteer there sorting donated books and mending spines with tape and patience. The formality of the allocation arrived as a tidy PDF with clean lines and a place for signatures. I signed, returned it, and felt something like breath gather again behind my ribs. Late in the week, a message came from Tessa. It was short, functional, almost formal. "Could Noah look at our back porch next Friday? The top rail is loose. We can handle the rest." There was no apology in it, no preface about Marcus, or explanations about timing. It asked for a skill and offered respect in exchange. I replied with 2 words that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Of course. I packed a small overnight bag around, then not because I needed to leave, but because I wanted to remember how to go towards something on purpose. 2 shirts, a book that didn't ask me to underline anything, a scarf that smelled faintly of sun. An email confirmation waited in my inbox from a simple inn an hour down the coast, a place with striped cotton on the beds and windows that open at the top. 2 rooms, it said, a tiny extravagance, one for me, one left in the calendar for a friend who might take the train last minute. I did not think about who that friend would be. It was enough to set 2 places at a table sometimes. On the morning I meant to leave the house rehearsed its small sounds. The screen door's spring gave back the exact resistance I like when hands are full. The heater settled to a quiet run. The refrigerator hummed like a content animal. I wrote Noah a note and propped it against the salt cellar. Tools in the blue bin, cookies in the tin. If you use the last of the nails, put the empty box upside down so I know what to buy. P.S. 2 paperbacks on the counter for the reading shelf if you approve. I stood a long time in front of the shadow box before I locked the door. The key on its hook, the green receipts under glass, the little card with my neat sentence, a tiny folded corner of Alan's old return receipt from years ago, kept. The word did not gloat. It simply stayed where it was told. On the drive south, the water kept even company with the road. Gulls wrote careless cursive above the breakwater. A man in a red watch cap sat on an overturned crate and repaired something by feel. I stopped at a diner where the coffee arrives in heavy mugs and the waitress calls everyone Han without irony. I ate pancakes that did not need butter and left a note under the tip line for the cook that said the bacon was exactly right. Some gratitude prefers privacy. When I reached the inn, the desk clerk slid a key across the counter on a brass fob that remembered other hands. 2 nights, she said, then added, "I put you on the 2nd floor. Better breeze." In the room, the window faced a line of beach grass and a slow sheet of water that did not feel obliged to prove itself. I opened the glass and let the air decide how much of it I needed. I slept with the lamp off for the first time in months. Morning came like something polite. I wrote a postcard to myself from the desk, a cheap tourist card with a lighthouse painted in the wrong proportions, and addressed it to my own box back home. "You did well," I wrote. "Not perfectly, not early enough, but well." I mailed it in the lobby on my way to walk along the water line where the foam leaves its lace and then erases it without asking anyone's permission. A text arrived while I watched a dog teach its person how to throw something properly. From Noah. "Porch rail at Tessa's sits straight now. She brewed tea without saying sorry. We talked about weather and how screws prefer to be convinced, not forced." He attached a photo of the finished corner, the seam closed the grain accepting the new line. Under it, a second shot, our little library. Someone had tucked a bouquet of clover in an empty jar beside the books. One title I had left was gone. Another dog-eared and beloved had appeared. Trade completed. I wrote back with a heart I would have been embarrassed to send 5 years ago. Then I put the phone away and let the ocean be the louder conversation. When I returned home, the house took me back without ceremony. On the stoop lay a package too large for the mailbox. Inside a small brass plate I had ordered before I left. Whitfield Coastal Trust, it read in simple letters. Below a single word, library. Noah and I mounted it on the post that afternoon, the metal catching the late light as if pleased to be asked to reflect something decent. That evening he stayed for soup. He ate 2 bowls and wiped the rim with a piece of bread, as if table manners and appetite had reached a signed agreement. He cleaned the pot without instructions. Before he left, he stood in front of the shadow box again, as people do when they cannot say the thing they mean. He didn't try to name it. He just nodded at the arrangement the way a visitor nods at the right picture in a museum. "Will there be a reading shelf in the winter?" he asked at the door. "Books read fine in mittens," I said. "We'll line it with felt." After he went, I walked through the rooms the way caretakers walk a site at night. Window latched, lamp off, stove cool. In the spare room, I sorted a box of papers that no longer needed to take up space. I kept the letter he wrote and a few bills that record the mundane nobility of staying paid up. I put the rest into a bag for shredding and felt the relief of lightness. Before bed, I opened the little mechanism behind the boat key and checked the small niche Alan had made. The slip with kept tucked inside like a seed. I slid a new thing in beside it. A tiny folded copy of the charitable set-aside reduced on the printer until it was no bigger than a stamp. A reminder to myself that memory can be generous without roaring. I lay under the quilt with the window cracked to the width of a palm. Somewhere out beyond the breakwater, a single horn called once, not a warning, a marker. The night answered with its ordinary breathing. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes learned again how to close when nothing required guarding. In the morning, I packed a small suitcase for the beach again, not because I needed to leave, but because I liked knowing I could. Zipper teeth married and slid without catching. Tape smoothed flat over the label of a box meant for donation. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed like a gull who had finally outsmarted a crab. I smiled because not every image needs to be profound. Some are just correct. Near noon, the mail slot lifted and fell. A final green card slipped through and landed with the quiet thump of paper doing its duty. Harbor Bright's return receipt signed with a careful hand from a clerk in their legal department. I added it to the shadow box. The arrangement felt complete but not sealed against the future. The door was not locked, only shut. I wrote one last note on the legal pad and taped it inside the pantry where codes and reminders live. Lock the vault, not the heart. I stood a moment with my hand on the paper, then closed the pantry and listened for the small hum the house makes when it approves a decision. Peace did not pour in. It held its shape like good glass. Outside, the reading shelf showed 3 new spines, and the little jar had traded clover for a pencil someone had sharpened into a tiny sword. I brewed tea and set out 2 cups, not because anyone was coming, but because 2 cups remind a room how to welcome without giving itself away. By dusk, the new hinge on the cabinet made its soft syllable. Somewhere Noah sent a picture of a level bubble sitting true over another repair. Tessa replied with a simple thank you and no flourish. The cottage kept its quiet, like a kept promise. The key rested where it always has. The green slips glowed dull under glass. The window admitted a narrow ribbon of air that smelled of salt, and whatever waits beyond salt for a name. I looked at the room, at the proof of choices that had learned to stand, and felt something loosen in the throat where speeches start. I had no speech left. Only a house behaving a boy, learning a life permitted to be ordinary on purpose. That was enough. I turned off the lamp. The dark arrived like a friend who knows where the cups live. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.